He leaned across the courtroom aisle and whispered it just loud enough for people behind us to hear. Enjoy being homeless. Then he smiled, like he had already won, like I was already erased. The judge hadn't even opened the evidence yet, but my cousin, Ethan, looked so certain, so comfortable in his prediction of my collapse. What he didn't know was that one email had already been submitted to the court, and it didn't say what he thought it did. If you've ever had someone write your ending before the story was finished, stay with me. And if this feels close to home, tell me where you're listening from. My name is Alina Brooks. I am 33, and I was never supposed to fight back. That's what everyone in my family believed. I was the quiet one, the organized one, the one who kept records instead of raising her voice. When my grandmother passed away, she left behind one asset that mattered: the house, a small brick home in the older part of town, not glamorous, but fully paid off. I had lived there for the last 3 years, not rent-free. I paid utilities, property taxes when Grandma couldn't, covered repairs. Ethan visited maybe twice a year, but when she died, he moved fast, faster than grief should allow. He filed a petition claiming Grandma had intended to leave the house to him. No updated will supported that, but he claimed there had been conversations, verbal promises. I had paperwork. He had confidence. And in families like mine, confidence often wins. At the first hearing, his attorney framed me as opportunistic. She moved in late in life, he said. She positioned herself. Positioned, like I had been waiting. But the truth was simpler. Grandma fell and fractured her hip. No one else stepped in. Ethan said he was too busy, so I moved in, cooked, drove her to appointments, managed her medications. I didn't expect ownership. I expected dignity. After her funeral, I found an email printed and tucked inside a cookbook in the kitchen drawer. Grandma had forwarded it to herself months before she died. It was from Ethan. Subject line, house situation. In it, he asked her to transfer the property to him before things get complicated. He wrote, "Alina is too emotional. She'll try to control things." The date on that email mattered because it contradicted his claim that she verbally promised him the house later. My attorney said we would introduce it at the next hearing. Ethan didn't know we had it. So when he leaned in and said, "Enjoy being homeless," he wasn't bluffing. He believed his narrative, that I was the desperate one, that I had no documentation, that I would fold under pressure. The humiliation wasn't loud, it was subtle. The way his lawyer looked at me like I was naive, the way my aunt avoided eye contact in the hallway, as if I were already disowned. I thought about when we were kids and Ethan would tell people I cried too easily. If someone teased me, he'd say, "She's fragile." I wasn't fragile. I just didn't perform strength the way he did. I internalized, he projected. Different survival skills. But in court, projection can sound like authority. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Counsel," he said evenly, "are there additional materials to be entered into record?" My attorney stood. "Yes, Your Honor." Ethan shifted slightly, probably expecting procedural motions, not documentation. "Exhibit C," my attorney continued, "is an email dated 6 months prior to the decedent's passing." The clerk distributed copies, paper sliding across wood again. That sound always feels permanent. Ethan picked his up casually at first. Then his posture changed. His shoulders stiffened. He flipped back to the first page. The subject line, his own words, the request for early transfer, the comment about me being emotional, the timing. It didn't prove he coerced her, but it proved something else. Intent, pre-existing desire, before his alleged verbal promise. The judge scanned the documents slowly. The courtroom grew quieter. I didn't look at Ethan. I looked at the table. because power doesn't always need eye contact. Mr. Brooks, the judge said finally, how do you reconcile this correspondence with your claim that the decedent expressed intent at a later date? Ethan's mouth opened, closed. His attorney leaned toward him, whispering urgently. It was just a conversation, Ethan said quickly. I was clarifying. The judge's eyebrow lifted slightly. Clarifying what? Silence. Because clarification implies prior agreement, and there was none. The email didn't win the case instantly, but it cracked his certainty. The narrative that I was the desperate one began to shift, and the word homeless no longer felt like a prophecy, it felt like projection. The silence after the judge asked that question stretched longer than anything Ethan had said to me all morning. How do you reconcile this correspondence? It wasn't accusatory. It wasn't dramatic. It was clinical. And clinical questions are dangerous when you don't have clean answers. Ethan shifted in his seat. It was just family discussion, he said. Everyone talks about property. The judge didn't react. And the statement that Ms. Brooks would try to control things. Ethan gave a small shrug. She tends to. There it was again. The character attack. Not about facts, about personality. My attorney stood. Your Honor, the timing of this email directly contradicts the petitioner's sworn statement that the decedent independently initiated transfer discussions after this date. Sworn statement. Contradict. Those words land harder than insults. The judge turned another page. Ms. Brooks, he said, looking at me for the first time directly, did you request this property be transferred prior to your grandmother's passing? No, Your Honor. My voice didn't shake, not because I wasn't nervous, but because truth stabilizes you in a way performance never can. Did you discuss ownership with her? Yes, I answered honestly. She said she didn't want Ethan to pressure her. The courtroom shifted slightly at that. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's not true, he snapped. The judge's gaze sharpened. Mr. Brooks. He fell silent. There's something about being publicly corrected that exposes ego, and Ethan had always relied on ego. When we were kids, if he lost a board game, he'd insist someone cheated. If a teacher criticized him, he'd say she was biased. He never lost cleanly. He reframed. That's what this petition felt like, a reframing of reality. The judge leaned back. Intent matters, he said, slowly, and so does documented pressure. Pressure. The word lingered. My attorney continued. We also have utility payments, tax records, and documented caregiving responsibilities undertaken by Ms. Brooks over the past 3 years. The clerk passed additional documents forward. Receipts, bank transfers, medical appointment logs. It wasn't glamorous evidence. It was mundane. But mundane is powerful because it's consistent. Ethan laughed softly. So because she paid some bills, she gets the house? His tone was sharp now, fracturing. No, the judge replied calmly, because legal title remains with the estate, and absent a valid will revision, we rely on statutory inheritance guidelines. Guidelines. Not volume, not confidence. Guidelines. Ethan's attorney whispered again, but this time it looked less strategic and more concerned. During recess, Ethan cornered me in the hallway. You really think you deserve it, he hissed. I deserve fairness. You moved in and manipulated her. I took care of her. You positioned yourself. There it was again. Positioned, as if caregiving were a strategy. You sent that email, I said quietly. You're twisting it. It's dated. His eyes flickered. For the first time, I saw something different there. Not arrogance, anxiety. "You don't get it," he muttered. "Then explain it." "She promised me when I was younger. She said I'd always have somewhere to land." The confession surprised me. "She told me something similar," I replied softly. He blinked. "What?" "She said family should never weaponize comfort." That shut him up, because that's what he had done. Weaponized housing. Enjoy being homeless. He didn't actually want me homeless. He wanted leverage. The second half of the hearing focused on procedural law. Statutory distribution favored equal division between surviving grandchildren, unless valid documentation indicated otherwise. There wasn't any. No updated will, no notarized amendment, just Ethan's assertion of verbal intent. And now, an email revealing preemptive pressure. The judge closed the folder slowly. "This court will review all submissions and issue a written decision within 2 weeks." 2 weeks. Suspended again. Outside the courthouse, my aunt finally approached me. "You didn't have to embarrass him like that," she said softly. "I didn't. The email did." She looked conflicted. "He's just trying to secure his future. So am I." That was the part people didn't like. When quiet people assert equal rights, it disrupts hierarchy. At home that night, I walked through Grandma's house slowly. The creak in the hallway, the soft floral wallpaper in the kitchen. I wasn't clinging to property. I was clinging to stability. The difference matters. Ethan texted me late. "You think one email wins?" I replied, "It clarifies. You're not as innocent as you act." I stared at that message for a long time. Innocence. That's what people project onto quiet women, and when you defend yourself, they call it calculation. But calculation is just preparation without theatrics. 2 weeks felt like 2 months. When the envelope finally arrived from the court, my hands were steady, because regardless of outcome, the word homeless no longer defined the narrative. Documentation did.
The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for almost an hour before I opened it. Not because I was afraid of losing the house, but because I was bracing for what the decision would mean for us, for the family, for the version of me they were comfortable with. When I finally slid it open, I didn't skim. I read every line. Based on the submitted documentation, absence of revised testamentary instruments, and evidence of pre-mortem correspondence indicating attempted influence, the court denies the petitioner's claim of sole entitlement. Denied. The word felt firm, measured, not emotional, just legal. The property shall be distributed according to statutory inheritance guidelines. Equal division, 50-50. I exhaled slowly. Not victorious, relieved. But relief comes complicated when it's shared with someone who wanted everything. My phone buzzed within 10 minutes. Ethan. Unbelievable. That was all he wrote. I didn't respond. He called next. I let it ring once before answering. "You're proud of yourself?" he demanded. I'm calm. "You ruined this." "No," I said quietly. "I escalated it." He laughed sharply. "You think splitting it fixes anything? I needed that house." There it was. Need. Not promise, not inheritance destiny. Need. "For what?" I asked. "For security," he snapped. "For once in my life, I wanted something stable." The irony almost hurt. So did I. Silence. "I've been renting for years," he continued, voice lower now, "jumping from place to place. You were already living there. That doesn't make it yours." I thought Grandma understood. "She understood pressure," I replied. He didn't answer, because we both knew the email hadn't just exposed desire, it exposed timing. He had tried to secure transfer while she was vulnerable. That matters. "I didn't want you homeless," he muttered finally. "You said I would be." That was heat of the moment. It was projection. The word landed heavy. He exhaled. "You always talk like you're above it." "No," I said softly. "I just don't shout." That difference had defined us since childhood. He performed confidence. I documented reality. Growing up, if there was one slice of cake left, Ethan would grab it and say, "I was here first." If I protested, he'd smirk. "You should have moved faster." But adulthood doesn't reward speed. It rewards evidence. The next week, we met with a mediator to discuss options: sell and split, or buy each other out. I had savings. He didn't. He wanted to keep the house. "I grew up there too," he said during mediation. "So did I." "You're already established," he pressed. "You have a job, stability. That doesn't disqualify me." The mediator, a woman with patient eyes, asked a simple question: "Are either of you willing to compromise?" Compromise. The word tasted different than concession. I had to be honest with myself. Did I want the house because of memory or because of fairness? Both, but one mattered more. "I'm willing to buy his share at fair market value," I said. Ethan looked stunned. "You can afford that?" "Yes." He shifted in his seat. Because this wasn't the narrative he expected. He expected me clinging, begging, threatened, not prepared. "You'd take it all?" he asked. "I'd pay you for your half." The room quieted. He stared at the table. "How long would I have to decide?" 30 days, the mediator suggested. 30 days again. Time seems to measure every conflict. Outside the building, Ethan stopped walking. "You don't hate me?" he asked suddenly. The question surprised me. "No." "You should." "Why?" "Because I tried to push you out." "Yes," I said evenly, "but I won't define you by one move." He looked at me like he didn't know what to do with that. When someone expects retaliation and receives steadiness instead, it disarms them. "I panicked," he admitted. "I know." He thought if he didn't secure it first, he'd lose. That's not how inheritance works. It feels like it does. We stood there awkwardly, two adults shaped by scarcity in different ways. He saw security as something to grab. I saw it as something to protect. 30 days later, he accepted the buyout. Not graciously, but realistically. I transferred the funds through the estate account. Clean, documented, signed. When I held the final deed with my name alone on it, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt grounded. Because the house wasn't stolen. It was settled. And that's a different kind of power.
The day the deed was officially transferred into my name alone, I didn't celebrate. I cleaned. That's what I do when something heavy settles into place. I wiped down the kitchen counters, reorganized Grandma's spice drawer, replaced a loose hinge on the hallway cabinet. Mundane tasks. Grounding ones. Ownership doesn't feel dramatic when it's earned through paperwork and patience. It feels quiet. Ethan didn't come to sign the final transfer in person. He authorized it electronically. Detached. Efficient. We hadn't spoken much in the 30 days between mediation and decision. I heard through my aunt that he was frustrated, that he felt cornered. But cornered is different from exposed. Cornered implies unfair pressure. Exposed implies facts. One afternoon, about a week after the transfer, he showed up unannounced. Not angry, just standing on the porch with his hands in his jacket pockets. I opened the door. "You here to measure the windows?" I asked lightly. He almost smiled. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He walked through the living room slowly, like he was mapping memories. "This place feels smaller," he said. "It always was."
He nodded. I thought I'd feel worse. Do you? Not really. That surprised me. I think I just didn't want to lose, he admitted. There's a difference between losing and settling, I replied. He glanced toward the kitchen. She really did love you staying here. I loved staying. She told me once you were the steady one. I smiled faintly. She told me you were the brave one. He looked at me sharply. She said that? Yes. We stood there in that shared childhood space, the tension less sharp now. I shouldn't have said what I did in court, he said. Which part? He hesitated. Enjoy being homeless. I met his eyes. That wasn't about me. He exhaled slowly. No. It was about him, about his fear of instability, about the years he spent drifting between apartments, jobs, cities. He had projected that fear onto me, because if he could convince himself I was fragile, then securing the house felt justified. I don't want us to hate each other, he said. I don't either. He shifted uncomfortably. I always thought you'd fold. I know. You never yelled. I never needed to. That's the thing about quiet strength. It doesn't announce itself. It waits. He nodded. You underestimated me. I wasn't competing. That's why I lost. I shook my head gently. This wasn't a competition. He looked around one last time. Take care of it. I will. When he left, I didn't feel victorious. I felt settled. Because the conflict had never really been about square footage. It was about narrative control. He tried to frame me as desperate, as manipulative, as someone clinging to a house for survival. But survival wasn't the point. Stability was. And stability built through documentation is stronger than stability claimed through volume. That evening, I sat at the small desk in Grandma's old bedroom and thought about the hearing, about the whisper. Enjoy being homeless. At the time, it had pierced, not because I feared homelessness, but because it implied I had no leverage, no proof, no ground to stand on. The judge opening that email hadn't just exposed him, it had anchored me. Anchored truth. I realized something important then. People who speak with certainty often rely on others doubting themselves. When you don't doubt, when you verify, their confidence cracks. I walked through the hallway once more before bed, touched the wall near the kitchen where Grandma used to hang her calendar. This house was no longer contested territory. It was resolved space, and resolution feels different than victory.
It's strange how conflict can shrink once it's resolved. The house didn't look different after Ethan left that afternoon. The paint wasn't brighter, the floors didn't creak any less, but something inside me felt steadier. Not triumphant, just aligned. For weeks after the ruling, people in the family treated me carefully, like I might explode. Like winning in court meant I was suddenly aggressive. But the truth is, I didn't win against Ethan. I defended my position. There's a difference. One Sunday afternoon, my aunt invited both of us to dinner, neutral ground. I almost declined, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. Legal battles don't just drain money, they drain identity. You spend months being described by other people's accusations, manipulative, positioned, opportunistic, words that try to shrink your integrity. When I arrived, Ethan was already there. He stood when I walked in. Small gesture,
but noticeable. Dinner was quiet at first, clinking forks, soft conversation about work. Then my aunt cleared her throat. "I'm glad you two worked it out." Worked it out. I glanced at Ethan. "It wasn't easy," he admitted, "but it was fair." Fair. That word mattered more than victory ever could. After dinner, we stepped outside onto the porch. "Do you ever think about how different this could have gone?" he asked. "All the time. If that email didn't exist, I would have still fought." He looked surprised. "With what?" "With records," I said. "With truth, even if it was harder." He leaned against the railing. "I didn't think you had it in you." "I know. That's the part that unsettles me." "Why?" "Because I've always been loud, and I thought loud meant strong." I smiled faintly. "It doesn't." Silence settled between us. Not hostile, reflective. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what exactly?" "For trying to rewrite you." That landed deeper than the earlier apology, because that's what the petition had been, an attempt to redefine me as someone calculating, as someone exploiting grief. "You didn't rewrite me," I said softly. "You just tested whether I'd let you." He nodded slowly. "I won't again. I won't let you." We both laughed lightly at that, not because it was funny, but because it was honest. That night, back at the house, I stood in the living room with the lights off, just the faint glow from the street outside filtering through the curtains. I thought about Grandma, about the way she used to say, "Stability isn't given, it's maintained." Maintained through boundaries, through documentation, through refusing to be cornered into silence. Ethan's whisper in court once felt like a prophecy. Now it felt like a lesson. People project their fear. They assume you'll absorb it. They assume quiet means weak. They assume preparation means manipulation. But psychological strength doesn't scream. It holds. It verifies. It waits for the right moment to present the folder, or the email, or the truth. Owning this house doesn't make me powerful. What makes me powerful is that I didn't let someone else narrate my worth. I didn't let humiliation define me. I didn't let fear rush my response. I responded with evidence, with calm, with boundaries. And maybe that's the quiet comeback no one expects. Not explosive revenge, not dramatic collapse, just steady correction. If this story felt personal to you, tell me what boundary you had to set. Thank you for listening.